My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States. At iba pa. My name is Joe Bernardo, and I'm joined by my fellow hosts.
Who was that?
Ryan Carpio.
I don't know. Elaine Delalis.
And
Mike.
Producer Mike.
At iba pa.
welcome back to TFAL.
Yay!
Yay! As Ryan downs his drink. I am excited for this episode because we get to talk about colorism.
What?
Colors.
Colors.
Colorism. What is that?
But basically, prejudice or discrimination based on skin tone.
Got it.
Yes.
But before we get to that, we have a few housekeeping items that we have to go over.
Like our
TFAL of the episode.
The TFAL of the episode is Julie la 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 Julie La.
Yeah, Julie.
And that is how her name is typed out because that's how it is on the Patreon. So that is why Julie La, you got a song attached to your TFAL. Shout out.
And the Christmas one for some reason, but yes.
Well, because I don't have any La La songs that
Julie La.
I don't know.
Oh, it's funny. I was one time I was in San Francisco and I wrote a Uber. No, Lyft. Sorry, I wrote a Lyft, and the Filipino Lyft driver was all like, "Oh, where are you gonna go?" I go, "I'm gonna go see my in-laws." And he goes, "In-laws? That's not your in-laws. That is you're above the laws."
Wow.
Anyway, shout out to that guy. I forgot his name.
Thanks, Tito Lyft driver.
But yes, we also have a voicemail that I'd like to play for you.
Hey TFAL, it's Noel. I'm calling from Philadelphia, and I just wanted to give you guys a shout out. Love the podcast. I particularly love just how intersectional you all are, and just the great insight that you all provide given these topics. Anyway, I wanted to suggest a particular topic. I had this really weird conversation with my mom about body image, and it's been this huge sort of long life discourse around being fat, being thin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to suggest an episode about talking about Filipinos' body image issues, colonized bodies, and all that jazz. Hope all is well, and again, thank you guys for doing the work that you're doing. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Noel.
Yay.
It was a great voicemail. Yes, we are kind of going to talk about body image. We're not going to talk about maybe weight.
Yeah.
But we are going to talk about skin.
Correct.
And skin tone.
Yes.
Maybe weight will be covered in a future episode. I can't wait for it.
Wait, don't tell me.
Oh, wait a minute.
But
I don't have a pun. I feel left out.
But yes, I have dealt with weight issues my entire life, so
Me too.
I'm looking for it.
Me 3.
Wait, you were skinny before, Ryan?
Huh?
Wait,
Just kidding.
Thanks, jerk.
What are you trying to say about him now?
Sorry. You're perfectly
Aw,
round.
thanks.
But yes, we are going to talk about skin tone today, a different kind of body image issue.
Correct.
That is very prevalent in the Filipino and Filipino American community.
Correct.
Yes, so we are talking about colorism, which is more or less this the discrimination or prejudice of people based on skin tone.
Yes.
Yes.
And in this room, there's 3 light-skinned people and 1 darky-skinned person, a.k.a. me. As I stare at the room.
I used to be, I don't know, I guess
I feel like y'all are pale now that you are working in offices and
That's
not
true.
in the field.
Not in the field.
I used to be darker. I used to be way darker.
Yeah, you were actually when you were field rep and always like going out. I think
Like,
you
who's
were.
that dark Filipino guy?
I don't think you were like hella dark, but I do think you were a lot more tan.
Yeah, I was a little bit more kayumangi.
Kayumangi.
Yes.
I'm a Kayumang geek.
Oh.
Oh, come on. That was funny.
So have you? Let me ask you this before we get to our guest. Where have you seen colorism manifest? Either in the Philippines, here in the U.S. Where have you seen it?
I had an old boss who would go to the Philippines every year, like around that reunion time, January-ish, and he would always get a treatment done in the Philippines by like a doctor, like a dermatologist doctor. I don't think he went to Dr. Vicky Bello, who is like the person everyone knows in the Philippines, but I do know like when he would come back, he would just be like, look at me, I'm like so much lighter than I was when I came back like 3 months ago. And I would just be like, sure, yeah, but I could never tell the difference. They looked exactly the same. And I know somebody who I grew up with and went to high school with, and then went to the Philippines to go become a star, and is a client of Dr. Vicky Bello for skin treatments. And when I see this person now, they look like they've been
Bleached.
Wow.
Like they are lighter. And
But it's like a sickly white though.
yeah, it doesn't look natural.
Like they've seen a ghost.
Like they've seen the boo-boo. And I wish that they wouldn't have to do that, but like because of the field that they're in, entertainment in particular, like that's what's valued. And so it also seems promotional because then they can say like, oh, I went to Dr. Vicky Bello. Thank you for this chemical peel. Thank you for this, that, and the other. Because then it's promotional for Dr. Vicky Bello.
I actually don't know who that is. Dr.
Oh, you don't know who?
No.
Yeah, she's probably one of the most prominent
Is she a plastic surgeon?
dermatologist.
Dermatologist,
One of
plastic
those.
surgeon. Yeah. I know that Yolanda Foster, or formerly Foster, now Hadid from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She actually in one season talked about going to Dr. Vicky Bello and like went to her for treatments in the Philippines.
And, she's based in the Philippines.
Correct. She's based in the Philippines.
Right.
I guess in general, I see it. So I want to talk about like Philippine television because that's what I probably first realized it. The affinity for like very light-skinned people. So even as a young adult, watching, those variety shows and or even like the telenovelas that have become popular in the Philippines, most of the people that are on TV are very light skinned, and my brothers and my sister would comment, they all look kind of the same. They all look very, very similar. Maputi, mestizo.
High cheekbones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the entertainment industry, right? It's like that. In terms of like everyday, I don't know, and I can't say that I've experienced it personally, but I have experienced the personally I've experienced it being a positive thing to someone commenting to me that I'm light skinned when I was younger. So that was always very, very weird to me. But in terms of like everyday life, I'm sure it exists. I'm sure that it probably is more. Colorism exists more in the realm of entertainment, in the realm of like something that we can see visually, as opposed to like an office. But I may be wrong. I actually don't know.
I remember we had a conversation once, Mike, and like I was describing someone, and I used their coloring as a reference point. I was like, oh yeah, he's that darker person, that dark skinned dude who so and so. And you pointed out you asked why I said that. Like, why did I point out they were dark? Yeah. And I feel like it's always been on my mind, maybe like I had unconsciously like I always know like, oh, that person's light skin, or and when I would make a description of someone, that's what I would use. I would say like if they're Filipino, I would be like, oh yeah, they're like this darker, tall Filipino, probably plays basketball, blah 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 blah. Like like that's the train of thought. Like I go to skin color first.
Yeah,
which is weird because I don't really, I guess, because so I mean my family, like they're fairly like light skinned, I guess, and then maybe like because of that I tended to tune out those kind of conversations when I was a kid. Like I know it probably came up, but but I didn't really fixate on it. Like I know I'm sure someone like my grandmother or whatever would be like, oh, like, you know, you look like you're getting dark or whatever. But like, you know, like if I think about like, yeah, my family as a whole, we're all fairly reasonably like, you know, I guess medium. I don't know if I think it was like light. I mean, I totally can tell the difference if I've been out for a while though, because like I don't really wear shorts. And if I compare like my legs to my arms, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like 5 tones darker on my arms than my legs. It's my default, like, apparently my default skin tone is like white, like pale white.
It's like floating shorts.
Yeah. Ghost legs.
Mike has put our arms together when he's really pale, and he has said, look, we're ebony and ivory.
But I mean, it wasn't like a big deal like growing up, and I feel like I only noticed it more when I started paying attention to like Philippine media.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like when I noticed, it was like, how come everyone is so like pale skin, right? Because like, I mean, I grew up in like Ventura County, as I mentioned before, and like, you know, you have kind of the full array of like people from different parts of the Philippines, and so like, I didn't really have a default like this is like the one color I should expect of like a Filipino. Like, I just already knew and assumed that Filipinos come from all different kind of shape, sizes, colors, etc. But then when I started watching like, you know, the Filipino channel, or even back then like the international channel before, like, you know, it would be like, wow, everyone has like a very, very, very like specific look,
Right.
a very specific tone, like consistently. And I was just like, and in my vague memories of going to the Philippines as a kid, I was just like, I don't remember seeing anyone like looking like that,
Right.
because my parents are from like, you know, the province, so it was just like,
Isn't it
you
kind
know.
of strange too when you watch like Filipino television, or they all look not Filipino? Like,
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, that doesn't look anything like a
Like
That
when
guy's
you look
Spanish.
at the hosts, you look at the hosts in the variety show,
Yeah.
and then you look at the audience.
yeah, they're
It's so
completely
different.
Yeah.
yeah, I've never met a Filipino named like Milby, right?
Hey, leave that beautiful man alone. Sam Milby, who is just at the Kalayaan Festival in San
Oh my
Francisco.
But, you know, I just noticed that it's a very different, yeah, as you pointed out, like the folks on the stage versus the folks like, you know, from
In
the
the
audience
audience.
looked
Right.
very different from each other.
Yeah, I didn't really notice until I kind of noticed the Philippine media as
Yeah.
well. Same with story as you, Mike. I remember going to the Philippines. I mean, this is when I was a little older, but I remember going to the Philippines, and I saw then Vice President Jun Binay. Is it Jun Binay? Shoot. The Vice President under Aquino. And he was at some, you know, tourist attraction or some kind of place in Bataan. And then I told my cousins when I went back to my cousin's house, oh, I saw Vice President Binay. And they said, oh, did you see how dark he is?
Wow.
Yeah, because he's like fairly, you know, dark skinned. And he,
Oh, he looks like white color.
yeah. And people not made fun of him, but actually made comments about how dark he is. Like, wow, he's really dark for like someone that prominent. And the fact that I remember one time seeing some kind of variety show, it could have been like Wow Wowie or something on TFC, and then they had like caricatures of all the different kind of people who were running for president
I'm scared
into
about where
2016.
this is going.
And the person was wearing
I
blackface
knew it.
What the-
when they were
God.
representing Vice President Binay.
That's so messed up.
Yeah, and the skin tone was totally kind of his caricature, his
The fact that he was dark.
yeah.
Okay, so then like with Duterte, he seems like a darker dude.
Yeah.
Do they not make fun of him because they don't want to get murdered?
That, and I'm sure there's other things that kind
Okay.
of talk about Duterte. But yeah, I mean, it's
It's
just
like Duterte's politics or his skin tone. Huh?
They're like,
But yeah, it just goes to show how prevalent, you know, colorism is in the Philippines, and it actually kind of predates. You know, colorism happens all over the world, right?
Yes.
Like different communities, and yeah, colorism kind of is evident in Indonesian and Indian, and these are kind of also kind of pre-colonial
Yeah.
conceptions, and then it's so ingrained in the Philippines, especially because you know, field workers are considered kind of lower class, and they tend to be darker skinned, right? So it's even that's how it's structured, kind of within kind of the class structure within the Philippines. Yeah, so it's hard to kind of erase that, eradicate that. you
Yeah.
know?
Well, so there's also like different terms in Tagalog, right? Like, have you guys ever in the States heard anyone say that person looks like an actor.
Yeah.
But like, what does that mean?
Whenever I heard that, it was in reference to somebody who was like light skinned and like had the like Filipino embodiment. Like so when I think of a male, it's like light skinned, tall,
Right.
and high cheekbones,
Like
and a
nose,
pointy
pointy
nose
nose.
too. It's not like flat or anything.
So
Yeah.
that's like a compliment in the Philippines. Like maputi, mestizo, or mukhang artista, right? And if someone say mukhang artista, it's like you automatically go to that, right? And so it's kind of it is kind of ingrained, because mukhang artista. What the hell does that mean?
Well,
There's
it's interesting too. Like I've known folks who are very talented, and like there's somebody like who had a really great voice and like wanted to go, and in LA. The mentality was like, oh, if you want to be an artista, go to the Philippines. You can do it there. The industry's there. But one person in particular, they're like, nah, bro, you can't go. You're dark.
Yeah.
Like, there's not enough skin whitening for you to make it. And I was like, that's super sad and like way fucked up to say, but also like facts, like accurate. Like if that dude went over there, nothing would have happened with him because he was very dark.
Right.
And that's so goddamn sad.
Yeah. So growing up, I don't know if you guys know the name Nora Honor, the actress.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she
You
was
want to got caught with Shabu? Or
That is also where it was going in my brain.
actually not where I was going with it, but yes, and more current news about Nora Honor was about that. But when she was younger, she was highly revered as an amazing actress, and the whole thing about her was that she was like super short. She was super great in acting, but she was also kayo manggi, and she was super brown. And that was like a thing about her, like that she was just not light skinned at all.
She wasn't?
No, Nora was considered like a very brown skinned, like morena kind of actress.
and then she visited Vicky Bello.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing is like
as an adult, she was not brown. Like
I don't know.
I only know her as an adult actress.
Yeah.
Not adult actress, like a porn star. I mean,
All about her adult career.
as an actress, as an adult. Oh, that connotation. I had to correct myself.
Wow.
But,
okay.
but I mean, like I think
took a weird turn.
she was. I don't know enough about her career to know this, but she might have even been typecasted as like the very common brown skinned. Yeah, like she was a very brown skinned girl, and I think, her allure was that she's an amazing actress.
Yeah.
I remember she's
but-
a good singer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, they kind of put her in a different category than all the others.
Oh, wow.
Like in terms of like, if you say mukhang artista, you never think Nora Honor.
Yeah.
You think somebody else who is like super light skinned, and more, mukhang artista is more light skinned and what you said, pointy nose and high cheekbones. So yeah.
So we actually asked some of our patrons, TFAL or TPALs, to give us some questions or give us some feedback about their experiences with colorism. Barbara Obena, she said, "What's the deal behind the soaps? Who started it? Does it actually work?" I think we talk about that in our interview, so just stay tuned for that. Tony Gertz, say what's up to your brother Yo. Sorry, I had to. Tony Gertz said, and I'm going to paraphrase because her email is fairly long. She said that we know colorism stems from a systemic issue that whiteness is ideal, and the closer your proximity to whiteness is seemingly more beautiful, intelligent, and ultimately rewarded you are. As for myself, I'm a biracial, half-white Filipino American. I generally present mixed, but I'm very light-skinned and often white-passing. My Filipino family is very light-skinned, which I can tell is something my mom is proud of, even if she never says so. I don't blame her for this. I can't blame her for this. But at the same time, I wish this internalized white supremacy didn't exist and wasn't inherently projected onto me and my siblings either. So her question is, how do we start reversing that thinking? Where did anti-dark skin even originate from? What caused the beliefs that dark skin is uncivil, less intelligent, less beautiful? And how do we kind of prove these narratives and beliefs aren't true within ourselves and within the wider community? So I know we're going to get into some of these things when we talk to Joanne Rondilla shortly. But to you all, how do you start reverse this kind of colorism thinking?
I wish I knew. I think there was a point in life where I just had to accept it, that I wasn't going to be like a really light-skinned person. Only because when I am on the lighter side of my skin tone, I think I look sick. Like, I don't look...
Well, do you want to be light-skinned? Is that like a desire?
Well, so it's weird because I can go back and forth with it. I grew up with a mom who... would use this thing called lina. It looks like a lipstick, but it's dots, and she would put it on her face. She'd rub it in, and then it would it was supposed to lighten your skin before you put your foundation on top. And she gave me a skin whitener when I was 9, because I was so dark in her eyes. And so like, this is something that I have grown up with my entire life. I've been told I'm the dark one. In fact, growing up, my nickname was Black Neck because my neck was really black. Wow. I honestly think it was from swimming, and I didn't scrub my neck. So I probably was just dirty. Mike's giving me a face like, I can't believe you just said that. But to be fair, I get really dark when I go swimming. So like, I was really dark. But like, so I would go back and forth with, do I stay out of the sun? Do I not do certain activities just to stay light? Yeah. But like, I just like to go swimming, and
but it affected you.
It did. It's a battle that I think I have a lot. And I think it impacts women on a different level than it does a man, because like, we have to do like certain standards of beauty, and so I don't know. I wish I could say I'm happy with my brownness and just be like, that's it, right? But I know that there are days where I'm like, I'm really dark today. Like,
really?
Or if somebody makes a comment like, dang, girl, you're dark. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I am? Like, oh, am I really? Then I have to combat that with, it's okay, you're fine. Right. Like, it's cool.
Because it's never said to you, you think it's ever said to you in like a... Like, do you ever feel that it's ever said to you, like, girl, you're dark in a good way? It doesn't, huh? It doesn't even come off like that.
Even if it is kind of in a good way, my brain won't let me accept it as a good way.
Right.
Because I've internalized the stigma of being told you're dark.
Yeah, and I don't,
I feel like there's more therapy that I need to go through.
No, I hear you with that too, because when it's said, like, I'm thinking about the times that it's ever said to me or to my nieces. My sister was the one who told me, like, use Escanol. I would use Escanol as a kid, and he was like, "Oh, okay." So I would use it. I was use skin toner, but her middle daughter, Jenny, is absolutely beautiful, but she's the darker toned skin out of all of them, out of all the kids. And I know she experienced something like that, where her mom would tell her, umiitim ka, you're getting dark, and I think part of that conversation has to be like to either tell my sister to stop saying that. But those can't be a normal part of the conversation. Yeah. And the normal part of the conversation should be about, it could be about health, but it shouldn't be about like skin tone she has no control over or anything like that. Yeah. So that's where I would start. My own family is kind of like that, so I would start there. Probably start, looking at beauty in a very different way. Yeah.
I think in college I started to be more accepting, and because that's when like I was a little bit more like brown and woke, and been like, oh, let me buy all the Kayumangi t-shirts and all that type of stuff. But it's never gonna negate like all the things that we all experienced growing up, right?
It's like 30 years versus 30 minutes of right? So,
but I think it's also it's indicative of how it's so embedded within our structures now, and the fact that like we are constantly reinforced with these messages that creates this kind of implicit association that white is actually better. Yeah.
Yes.
Right? So, for me, I think it's important to kind of understand that colorism is also embedded within kind of these class and larger social structures like capitalism, etc.
Exactly.
And the fact that like people who work in the field generally are darker because they have to work under the sun, right? And that's kind of this labor that is not considered valued. And I think that it's definitely, of course, exacerbated by colonialism and racism. But I also think like capitalism in general, it's embedded within those structures, and it's difficult to kind of eradicate the colorism because it's capitalism is still alive.
Right.
And
You're saying like there's levels and hierarchies of work.
yeah.
Workers, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate that there has been a movement online where like the Maganda Morena movement, where women are really like owning their brownness, because like those are things that like as a child I wish I could have seen that, because I didn't have anything to fall back on. I only had like cultural impact or pop culture I could ingest around me.
I also start thinking about kind of one of my last thoughts is it's such a weird thing to have an ism about something that you can't really control, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
maybe not. Sorry. Not to have an ism about. No, sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I meant to be so kind of like a prominent thing to want to change. Does that make sense? Like all these the skin tone thing, right? Like. I don't know if that shit works. It probably doesn't, right? And so I could change my fashion, I could change my clothes, right? But for like skin,
You can't change your skin.
tone, like the fuck, you know? Like I don't.
I mean, people. Yeah. It's,
Like you
No,
can
but I mean- but
you
I mean-
can get darker. You can go get a tan.
But
but then how do you get paler?
right,
Well, there's a whole industry
right.
we'll be talking about.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying is like it's such a very weird thing that's embedded in us. It's such a weird thing to also revere. Like, hey, you were born so light skinned. Awesome. You achieved nothing. You just got born.
yeah,
you know?
but that's,
I know that's a deeper conversation, but like,
But that's like you could say the same thing about racism, right?
right.
Yeah.
Or sexism, or
Right.
Yeah.
but it exists, right?
Like you're born a boy. Good for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'd like to thank Barbara Obena and Tony Gertz for their comments and questions. If you want to contribute to some of the questions or share some of your experiences, you can call our voicemail, or you could also become a Patreon, and we will ask you periodically. We will ask you questions that we're going to discuss in episodes. And with that, we are going to go to Joanne Rondilla and talk to her about colorism.
Hey, do you know of a way that I could support TFAL besides being on the show and giving you all this cool entertainment?
How?
Hey, Mike, do you know of a way?
No.
Jeez. Come on, guys. I know of a way. I could buy Ryan a Ko-fi.
A Ko-fi? What's a Ko-fi?
A Ko-fi is a way that I can give TFAL some money just for a one-time situation. Like if I have an extra $10, I'll buy TFAL a $10 cup of coffee.
Do we actually get Ko-fi?
We
Coffee?
get the money, so
Oh.
it's like that's the coffee.
That's cool.
Ko-fi.
Isn't there a subscription service too?
Yeah, you could be a TFAL Patreon.
Oh, how does that work?
You contribute monthly by like $5, $10, $15,
$100?
$100. If you want to do $1,000 because you're just so inclined. But yeah, you become a TFAL Patreon, and by doing so, we shout you out on the episode. You are the TFAL of the episode, and we do things on our special Patreon sometimes. But yeah, you could buy us coffee, or you could monthly subscribe or monthly contribute to us.
Oh, and we could buy all this new equipment.
Yes.
Yes, and we could go to different places to interview people around the country.
Yes, and you support this entertainment that you are getting for free.
Oh man, that's
We
so
are
awesome.
doing this for free, aren't we?
Because
Yeah.
I'm sick of spending money, my own pocket money. I'm doing it because I have a lot of bills too. You know.
That's right.
Yeah, so if you really love TFAL and you ever thought, I want to help those folks out, be a Patreon or buy us some Ko-fi.
And where do you go?
You go to thisfilipinoamericanlife.com, and under support, there'll be links for the Patreon and for the Ko-fi.
Cool.
Thank you. Welcome back to TFAL. Again, this is Joe. We are back to talk to an expert on colorism. I'd like to introduce folks to Joanne Rondilla. She is a professor at San Jose University. She got her PhD in ethnic studies from UC Berkeley. She's also a fellow. she's also a fellow Gaucho, UC Santa Barbara. I was a freshman when she was a senior.
Oh, cool.
Yes, and that's how I know her. But she's also a national expert or international expert on colorism in the Filipino community.
Okay.
So let's welcome Joanne Rondilla.
Welcome.
Yay, thank you.
Hi, Joanne.
I love that. Hi.
Welcome to
How
the
is
podcast.
everybody? Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Cool. So let's just get things started. Earlier, we talked a little bit about our experiences of colorism when we were growing up within the Filipino American experience. And now we want to hear from an expert. And that's why we brought you on. So, Joanne,
Okay.
how did you... Let's first off, before we actually get to the subject, I want to talk about like you and your life and how you came to the U.S. So, how did your parents come to the U.S.? Where were you born? Where did you grow up, etc.?
Okay, so my parents actually immigrated from the Philippines to Guam. And as part of this, I actually didn't know until like over 10 years ago. My dad came first in 1955 because he was part of, he was part of like, there were a lot of Filipinos who were being recruited to go from the Philippines to Guam to help rebuild Guam in the post World War II era. So my dad, his background was in engineering, mechanical and electrical engineering. And then 10 years later, he met my mom. And so they went back to the Philippines, got married, and then went to Guam. And that's where me, my brother, and my sister were born and raised. So I guess technically we didn't come to the U.S. because we were born in the U.S. and we're all U.S. citizens. But I always felt like I wasn't a full American, especially like when I was 13, we moved to Union City, California. And so, yeah, I was like an American on paper, but I wasn't like an American to people here. So,
oh, wow. What was life?
Yeah, so that's,
what was life like in Guam?
so life on Guam, I think, is great. Like, looking back, I can see why my parents, decided to immigrate there. Because one is like, it was easier to immigrate to Guam than it was to California. But, it's like very small town. Like I lived in the village of Dudut, and that's where a lot of like Filipinos lived. So, I had a lot of like Filipino neighbors and, I was a latchkey kid, and I didn't know that was a thing until I came to California, where people were like, oh my God, your parents left you alone? Because I thought, no, like everyone in kindergarten, when you come home, you have a key that's, strapped around your neck. You open the door and you wait, you watch TV and do your homework until your parents come home. So like it was nice. The thing is like it's a small island, 5 miles wide, 32 miles long, and there's the feeling of like, there's the nice feeling of everybody and everyone knows you, but then there's also the invasive feeling of everybody and everybody knows you. So, yeah.
Kindergarten, though.
Yeah,
That's super young.
I had a key around my neck from like 6th grade on, maybe, but
Kindergarten. Wow. Well, because you knew your neighbors and everything, right?
Yeah, we knew, and everybody like watched out for each other, and like our neighbors next door raised greyhound dogs, and so like I think people were just afraid to go to like our general side of the street, because if you were like 20 feet within like their house, like 20 greyhound dogs come like, rah, 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 like they come like barking at you. So I don't think my parents had anything to worry about. Like,
oh my God, you're living that's like my dream, because it reminds me of The Simpsons when like Mr. Burns had all those greyhounds.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
It's a random reference.
I know. Well, like I sing that See My Vest song like all the time from that episode. Sorry.
So did you have a lot of Chamorro friends?
I did, but for me growing up, I don't think I realized like who was Filipino and who was Chamorro. I just felt like we were all friends and neighbors. So So when I went to California, when we moved to California, I remember thinking Filipinos here were weird and they weren't like real Filipinos because they didn't eat the food that I ate. And then later on, I realized, oh, I eat Chamorro food. They eat Filipino food. Like there was some like confusion for a little bit, you know, but yeah, I mean, and my sister married her now ex-husband, like she married into a Chamorro family. And so yeah, like, you know, like when you go to fiesta, any fiesta on Guam, it's like a mix of like Chamorro, Filipino, some Chinese and Japanese food, and like a little bit of American food. So
got it. So do you prefer white rice or red rice?
that's a hard one. Red rice to me is like fiesta food, so I would like to eat it more often, but I don't get to because it's like party food. So every day is white rice, and then like special occasion rice is red rice.
Got it.
I just put on my list explore red rice.
Oh, it's so good.
really good.
I've never really.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It is?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's,
I mean, I've had it, but I didn't. I think it was just so weird looking to me.
But you have weird food tendencies. Like if it doesn't look or taste like how your mind thinks it's supposed to be, you get all weird.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah. Here's my tip on red rice though, is like for me, if I don't see bacon in it, I don't trust it. Yeah.
a good
So that's just my tip. You know, like,
Bacon.
Mike,
there's
are you
supposed
more
to be
intrigued
bacon
now?
in it.
I think bacon fixes everything. So
Yeah.
Pork is a spice.
Yes.
We've already decided this.
Yeah, because my sister and I argue over red rice because I always make it with bacon and she doesn't, and I'm just like, no, yeah. So it's become a family thing. Like we have to argue with her. Like you need to put bacon in it.
I'm a little biased,
I
but
mean,
I like your style better than your sister's. Just saying.
So Joanne, you you research a lot on colorism in the Philippines.
Yes.
And among
Well,
Filipino Americans as well too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it about like your upbringing or childhood, either in Guam or here in California, that brought you to research that?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, there's the childhood or like growing up component. Like I grew up in a family, like on my mom's side, they're all light and they're like chinita light. And, you know, like when mom and the aunts get together, they always talk about beauty. They always, you know, like I grew up like hearing like lots of comments about how certain cousins look over the other, you know, like just the way people look is always part of the conversation. And that becomes really, I think growing up to me, that was normal. But then like, as I got older, I realized like, wow, this is really like problematic. And also too, like part of that is like my mom and my aunts were all like, they were the provincial beauty pageant winners during the Flores de Mayo, provincial like celebrations. So there was always that, right? And then, but I didn't think of it as like a bona fide like area of scholarship until I was in graduate school, and my original proposal topic was not seen as favorable. So I was like looking for another topic, and one of the jobs that I did, and I did this for 12 years, was I worked in the cosmetics industry. So I worked at like a Nordstrom representing a brand, and, you know, we did skincare. And this was in like downtown San Francisco, like off of Powell Street, that Nordstrom. And there you see like women from everywhere, right? Because a lot of people traveled through San Francisco. So there were these incidences that happened. One was I noticed that oftentimes when certain women would come to the counter and they would want to get their foundation matched, they always wanted to get it matched lighter than what their actual skin tone is. And like from a makeup artist standpoint, like you don't want to do that because it's just not a good look.
That's my pet peeve.
Oh, go ahead.
That's my pet peeve, when the face foundation doesn't match your neck or your chest.
Yeah, because it's like gray face and then like brown everything else, right? So, but like I'd have customers who were insistent, like, no, you made me too dark. I need to be this color, you know. And like also when I would work, when I would do makeup for weddings, there were always like the aunties of the wedding or like even the moms of the weddings are like, no, you made me too dark. I don't want to look ugly in the photos. One day I met a client who like, her face was blue, like blue, and it was peeling. And I was like, I didn't, you know, because you don't want to say anything. You don't want to be like, dang, what's up with your face, right? Like, you don't want to do that. But, and she was Filipino. And so, and I was like, I didn't even know what to say. And then I guess she knew that people noticed her blue face. And so she explained that she had a blue peel and it's an actual process. And basically it's a really intense skin peel that turns your face blue. But like after a couple days or a week, everything peels off and, you know, there you have this new shining skin. And I just thought like, God, what is this obsession with certain women about like wanting to be lighter or doing something as crazy or as strange as like turning your face blue for a week to like, you know, to peel. And then the last straw was, so I worked for a skincare company and this was before the popularity of like cosmeceuticals, you know, so like now you over the counter you can get like retinol or like retinol products. And at the time, this is like 2000 in like 2001, not a lot of brands did these sort of dermatology level skincare things, right? So the brand that I worked with had those products, but they didn't really sell because people were too afraid to use like a retinol that they didn't get from a doctor. So what happened was when I was working for this company, they launched the brand in Hong Kong. And suddenly, like this one retinol product we had, like in San Francisco, we might sell 4 of that product in 1 month. When the Hong Kong counter opened, they averaged like 10 to 20 pieces a day. And what that did in San Francisco was when we had like Hong Kong travelers come to the counter, they would buy this product in mass. Like there was this guy that came to the counter and he was like, he showed me the picture of it. He goes, do you have this? And I said, yes. And he goes, I would like a dozen. And I said, I don't think we have a dozen. And he goes, well, I'll take all the pieces you have. And so I was like, why does this guy want this? So I asked him, you know, and he said, oh, my wife sent me to get this here because I'm here on business. And he said, and he goes, do you know this in Hong Kong? This is the #1 skin whitening product in Hong Kong. Oh. And I freaked out because it was the same product, same packaging, same everything. And after that interaction, I actually called our educator because the company at the time was so small that like, you know, you could call the educator. So I called the educator and I was like, hey, who did the education in Hong Kong? And she goes, I did. And I said, okay, a guy came here and said that this was the #1 skin whitener there, but that's not how I was trained. And that's not how you trained me on this product. Why is he calling this a skin whitener? And she was like, I have no idea. You know, she goes, because, you know, she goes, they get the same training you get. But she goes, there's certain products. She goes, if it's a retinol, if it's an exfoliator, if it's a sunscreen, like we found that in that market, all of that is called skin whitener. She goes, but no, like she goes, I don't train them about like skin whitening because I don't even understand that. So this was like just the year before I entered graduate school, and so like. I thought that there were like interesting bits and pieces of information and experiences that I was running into. And then when my initial project basically got rejected by someone really famous, I was like, okay, I need to look for something else. And this happened to be it.
That's fascinating though, that like a product, what was the product? Was it like a moisturizer or was it, it was a foundation?
It was a nighttime treatment. It was a retinol product. So yeah, so like for example, so Joe, you just came back from the Philippines, and you probably noticed all the skin whitening stuff.
Yeah. Oh, there's also here in Seafood City. I mean,
Oh yeah. You can see it in seafood. So you can see it like pretty much everywhere. But like, what a lot of people don't realize that like skin whitening products in the Philippines, you know, especially when you're looking at products from like these transnational corporations, right? Like L'Oreal or something like that. L'Oreal is not going to make a new batch of like X product for the Philippines and for the US unless they absolutely have to because of like FDA regulations, but they're really not going to do it. What they're going to do is they're going to slap a new label on it. And so the thing that I know, so the thing that I noticed was that, you know, like when I was in the Philippines, an exfoliator, like a facial scrub is marketed as a skin whitener. A sunscreen is marketed as a skin whitener. So the products are the same, but the understanding of what the product does and how the product functions are day and night different from the Philippines and say the United States.
This is so fascinating to me because like I use moisturizer all the time with SPF 15 in it. Like it's just like your standard one because my friend with sensitive skin yelled at me because I told her I never use moisturizer and she was like, you're a grown-ass person, put on some SPF. But like what you're telling me is that product would be marketed in the Philippines as a whitener?
Yeah.
Holy cow. It doesn't whiten my face, though, as Joe and Ryan and Mike can see. I'm still really brown.
Yeah, no. But the thing is, what we see in like these skin whitening products is even though like the name skin whitener is on there, it doesn't necessarily work. And oftentimes it's not really meant to work. It's meant to just sell an units. Idea. Wow. Right? It's meant to sell like a possibility.
Okay, so
this is mind-blowing to me.
This is blowing my mind, and I have a real question then. Because Mike's mom, every time she goes to the Philippines, when she comes back, gives me 2 bars of papaya soap. Does this not actually whiten skin? I never use it, to be fair. I end up throwing it in the pile to donate. So I just don't believe in it. But does it work really? Does it actually whiten your soap, or is it just making you clean?
So papaya, it comes down to ingredients. So if you look at like the components of the papaya soap, a lot of it is like the papaya enzyme, right? And the papaya enzymes that are used in that soap are meant to exfoliate the skin. So like there's the illusion of whiteness because if you have like libag on your, on your arm and you like scrub, you're gonna look lighter. Right?
Maybe it's just about being clean, right?
Stop being dirty.
Yeah, but like papaya enzymes, they're basically like fruit acids that exfoliate the skin. There's the illusion of whiteness, but it doesn't actually like whiten. Because like when I think about papaya soap, right, I think of like in the U.S. there's that brand Kiehl's. Yes. And one of their famous like skin scrubs is this like papaya. I think it's an enzyme. It's a pineapple and papaya enzyme like scrub. Like I'm not saying pound for pound they're the same product, but when you're looking at like the exfoliation, the thing that exfoliates, it's the fruit acids. But that Kiehl's product is not a skin whitener. You know what I mean? It's not marketed as a skin whitener here.
It's marketed as a cleanser.
As a cleanser, right? And so when I was in graduate school and I was looking at the advertising, because like the advertising of products was fascinating to me because again, like working in downtown San Francisco and later on in San Jose, where like you had like international customers, with products from Asia and wanting to look for that same product here in the US because like they ran out or something. And like like the equivalent is here, but like sometimes like those customers won't buy it because they need to see the word white. Even though if you pull the ingredient list, pound for pound, it's the same product, right? Wow. So this, like the language of whitening, skin whitening, advertising and marketing, like fascinated me.
So it's all perception then, perception of what the product is. And then, the fact that like culturally, Filipinos have bought into, in simplistic fashion, like white is right in terms of like skin tone.
Yeah. So could we actually go back and talk about you know, kind of just like the ingrained colorism that's within Philippine society. Can you tell us a little bit, kind of just a real short history or kind of short
Cliff notes.
short background on like why
Cliff Notes versions.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I explain colorism, especially colorism in the Philippines, to people who are not Filipino, because like non-Filipinos are always fascinated, like, oh my God, why do you guys want to be so light? You know, like you have this perfect whatever coconutty color, right? There's all of that. And what I tell people is that colorism, you know, stems from the colonial history of the Philippines. And what makes Filipino colorism distinct from colorism in like among like the Latinx community, among diasporic African communities, is that the Philippines has multiple layers of colonization, right? We have Spanish colonization, we have there's Spanish colonization, there's American colonization, there's Japanese, you know, intervention. And through these periods, right, these various historical periods in the Philippines, what's one of the things that's constant is the Chinese middle class, right? You know, and to colonial powers, the Chinese are seen as the civilized people compared to like indigenous Filipinos, because the Chinese business people are the business people. They have money, they have capital, and it's also like their relation to their relation to China, right? So when we look at colorism in the Philippines, it's informed by Western or European colonization, but it's also informed by the long-standing like Chinese class. So, and we see this in our own families when someone says, you know, looks longingly and positively at someone who's light-skinned, they're either like mestiza, as like, you know, they're mixed with you, they have like some type of European blood, or they have some type of like Chinese blood, right? And so that's what makes colorism like among Filipinos different, is because of the different layers of colonization that happened in the Philippines. You know, the longstanding relationship, the longstanding presence of Chinese in the Philippines. And so like our sense of colorism isn't literally black and white or dark and light, because it's defined by these other forces that happened historically. Was that good?
No.
No,
That's
yeah.
perfect. That's perfect. So you're saying like the influx of Chinese in the Philippines and kind of their position in Philippine colonial society.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. That
has kind of created this kind of class aspiration among like indigenous Filipinos or Indio Filipinos.
I never thought of it in relation to Chinese immigrants or Chinese, like the Chinese Chinoy class in the Philippines, because I always associated it with like not even American, it was like Spanish blood,
because of
like
mestizo.
because of mestizo. So like my head was like, oh, if you're lighter, it's because you have Spanish blood, not Chinese blood. So that's I'm learning a lot right now.
Well, because the Spanish population in the Philippines wasn't very high. It was very there were a lot more Chinese in the Philippines than there were Spaniards.
They were just more prominent. The Spaniards.
So
but when we're looking, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, but when we're looking at the hierarchy, like again, like what informs like the desire for lightness has to do with like Chinese presence as the merchant class, and then also like the presence of the Spanish, the presence of white Americans in the Philippines. So it's complicated because like it also different families understand lightness differently. So like in my family, there were parts of my family where like, again, like my mom and my aunts, they attributed their beauty to, you know, we have this, my mom would say like my great grandfather is Chinese. That's why we're so light. You know, that's where everybody traces their beauty in the family, is this Chinese grandfather, great grandfather named Jose, right? Like, you know, and so like it's, you know, like that part of my own family kind of fascinated me. And like, as I was doing the interviews, a lot of people would say like, yeah, in some families, they preferred someone who, like if you were Chinita, like that was the ideal because you were light, you still read as Asian, versus like in some circles, like if you're like Spanish mestizo, like, yeah, you're considered beautiful, but your association to the West makes you a little untrustworthy, so like colorism has a very complex, it's a very complex dynamic in the Philippines that's very different than any other part of the world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that there's like a spectrum, because I, in prep for this episode, I had texted a few friends to get their feedback on it. And my best friend had texted me like, oh, my sister actually gets a lot of flack for being the dark one in our family. And I know this family, they are all light skinned in my eyes. And like, the sister who is also a friend, I'm like, she is not dark. Like, in what I interpret on my bias of what darkness is. And but my best friend was like, yeah, like she's the darkest in my family. And I was like looking at pictures and I'm like, I literally couldn't tell the difference between my best friend's skin tone and her sister's skin tone. Like to me, on my eye, they could have been the same. But like their family had interpreted it as, oh no, she's dark. She's dark as fuck. Like, so we're going to clown on her because there's like, I don't know if it's a moral judgment or whatnot, but like lightness is supposed to be better. And it also feels very gendered, right? Like women are steered towards these products. Women are like, their beauty and value is ascribed to like an American version, American standard of beauty that like brown-skinned Filipino girls who are all under 5'5" aren't going to be able to attain, because like no one's going to be blonde, blue-eyed, and light. And also like in America, you want to be blonde, blue-eyed, and tan. Like we all got the tan part. We're just not the blonde. At least not blonde that's not coming out of bleach or sun in from a bottle.
Yeah. Well, even like American desires for tanning, there's some problems there, and we can talk about that later. But
So does colorism affect women more than men?
Historically, yes. And reason being is historically, and this is like across culture, beauty was seen as the responsibility of women. Where men are seen as providers, women's worth was always based on how they look, right? And this is why colorism historically affects women more than men, because if a man is unattractive, he can buy his way out of not being attractive by being highly educated, by having a good job and earning a lot of money, right? Because like those things give him social capital. Versus women, even when a woman, if she's dark-skinned, if she's highly educated, or if she earns a lot of money, or maybe she earns more money than, say, her spouse, she's still not given, she's still not seen as having like this high level of social capital, because historically beauty is conceived as the responsibility of women. But I will say that, so if we look at the numbers if we look at like sales figures regarding beauty products that are marketed and sold to men, that is, like it increases every year. And like, I feel like when we look at the research on beauty and beauty standards, like more research needs to be done among men. Especially like in the era of like social media, and also like looking at some intersections regarding like beauty, skin tone, and sexuality. I feel like those are areas that need to be explored. So if anyone listening is interested in this, like I would love to like mentor you through that.
So I have a question. So like when I watch television, like Philippine television, or even like in TFC, most of the people that I see on TV in prominent positions are light skinned, in the Philippines. How do you see that manifest in like Filipino American, like here in the United States? How do you see Filipino colorism manifest itself?
Filipino colorism still exists, even if you're American born. Like myself as an example, like I am impacted by colorism, even though like I am U.S. born, and part of that has to do with like I was raised by immigrant parents. So one of the patterns that I see is that like your proximity to the home country, or your proximity to people who, like to that immigrant generation, the closer you are in proximity to that generation, you are going to absorb some of like their values in terms of skin tone. Because like I this was not like among like Filipino interviewees that I met, but among like other Asian groups. I remember I was talking to this Japanese American woman, and she was like 4th generation, and the whole skin tone dynamic thing just, like went over her head. She had no idea what this was, because as far as she was concerned, like she was American and they didn't really care about skin tone. So I think it has to do with like proximity to to an immigrant generation. So you can be Filipino American, and like, because Filipino Americans, we live in this we live in this era of like tan is beautiful, but if you are exposed, especially like at home, to conversations about skin tone, then yeah, you are going to be impacted by colorism. But I do think like the further along we go in the generation, skin tone won't matter as much. But there's still issues of race here in the United States. And I think some of those dynamics impact colorism for a Filipino American.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I have a question. So it's kind of common narrative that colorism is basically stemmed from this quote unquote colonial mentality. That's kind of a dominant, I guess, narrative out there. But I think you really complicate that. Can you explain how like it's not that simple of just kind of switching your mindset?
Yeah. So this was one of the, I don't want to say like I was stumped, but I did have to like really think deeply about this particular question about colonial mentality, because like my understanding of colonial mentality is like it is this like internalized self-hate. Now, and the reason why I think that understanding colorism in terms of colonial mentality, the reason why I think that's limiting is because you're basically putting one of it is like you're making the person responsible for these feelings. Like you need to get over how you feel. You need to love yourself. You need to, empower yourself and find the beauty in you, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think framing it just as colonial mentality, it's really limiting, because what I found and what I found in my research is that, feelings about like skin tone hierarchies are a product of systemic forces, historical, political, economic, racialized, systemic dynamics that inform colorism. So it's not as easy as you just need to love yourself. You just need to embrace the brown person in you, because there's so many things in the life of like a Filipino American that tells them that they're not valued. Right. So it's not as easy as saying, get over the colonial mentality, get over this internalized self-hate, because you have to address the why of that self-hate, the why of the need to like lighten. Right. So I think, colonial mentality is important. It's an important starting point, but it's like just a fraction. It's just a tiny piece of the pie. So,
yeah, and I think if you are like in the Philippines and you're born into this society where skin tone does matter, and white skin actually, or lighter skin actually, means upward mobility.
Why wouldn't you want it?
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to?
Want it, right?
Yeah.
Get that edge.
Yeah, and then it's hard for us, I guess, as Filipino Americans, for many folks to understand that it's just so embedded within kind of the structures in the Philippines, that it's not easy just to change a mindset.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, people don't, it's so normalized, like, people don't really question it, right? You know, so, for example, like, when I was conducting my interviews in the Philippines, like, the sort of, like, anti-dark sentiment was so, it was just so everyday. Like, there are certain things that were said in some of the interviews where it's like, I would never think any Filipino in the US would say that, but then it's just part of everyday conversation, you know? And so, like, that's how embedded either skin tone consciousness or a lack of skin tone
What do you
consciousness is
mean
embedded
by
in,
that? Like, what are the
so
comments?
for example, like, when I did my interviews, one of the things I would ask is about, like, dating and marriage. And I remember distinctly this one woman who, like, you know, she's working class but she's very light skinned. Like, she grew up poor, but she was very light skinned. And in some of the things that she said, it was very clear she understood her social capital as someone who had light skin. And so the one quote I remember from her, so to this day, was when I asked her about, like, dating and marriage preferences, she goes, I don't like negros. I'll never date a negro. And it was so, like, the record just like, what? You know, and it was sort of like, and you know, like, as the researcher, it's not my job to be like, girl, you got problems. Like, you know, you have to have, like, you know, you have to have, like, neutral face. Yeah. And you have to, like, really dig in and wonder, like, okay, like, how, like, why does she feel this way? How does she feel, you know, like, so yeah. And I think that when you're battling something as simple as that, right? Something as simple as, like, when I would go out with my cousins, there's this one cousin, like, we went on, like, the Imelda Marcos tour of, like, you know, like, old Manila or something. And then we went to, this, like, fancy restaurant, which name I can't even remember. And, like, we're the same color, but for some reason, and I get it, like, because I kept running into this, like, I read as an American. And I remember, like, we were at this restaurant and I'm with my cousin, and the table next to us, I could understand in Tagalog, they were like, why is this woman eating with her maid? You know, and it was so, like, it was so hurtful to me, because I was like, this is my cousin, you know, like, she's not, like, we're the same color, and, like, more importantly, we're from the same family, you know, and, like, and he, you know, like, and I know my cousin heard it too, you know, because, like, we looked at each other, but I can also see, like, the look on my cousin's face, like, please don't say anything, right? Like, you make too much trouble, my American, like, my American cousin, right? Like, just leave it alone, you know? So, like, yeah, I mean, you know, so it's, you know, like, that's why, again, like, colonial mentality, it's such a, it's a tiny fraction of, like, of how we, it's a tiny way of understanding, like, how we understand, like, the bigger beast of colorism and colonization in the Philippines and power dynamic in the Philippines that's so color coded.
Yeah. So you're talking about, like, your family and how people interpret it, like, your family comes from, like, a legacy of beauty queens, and they value the lightness. How do you address the comments when, like, family comments on your coloring? Like, for example, as a kid, I've always been dark skinned. I've always been fairly brown. And in the summer, I go swimming a lot. And my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle always used to tell me, you have to put sunscreen on so you don't get too dark. And, like, they believed that the sunscreen would save me from my tan. And I didn't have the comprehension or knowledge at 9 to tell them sunscreen protects me from getting skin cancer. It doesn't stop me from getting dark because I'm going in the pool in the sun. But like, I know I've internalized a lot of those sentiments, and like as an adult and then as a woman, like I've always tried to like combat those feelings. But so like, what are your tips in terms of like how, if like another person is listening, what they can do to address it with their family?
Man, I wish I had good tips.
Flip a table.
Be like, fuck off, Tita. I like my dad.
Throw the escanol at them.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, so when we're looking at these conversations and the issue of colorism, I think that the space that is most impactful, but also the most hurtful is, so I called it like intimate spaces, the spaces in which like it's you and your family, you and your friends, right? Because I think, you know, like for me, it's easy to like, when I walk into like a classroom or something, to say like, F you all, like I'm brown and proud and beautiful and blah, 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 blah. But when like, it's your own mom saying, you know, Anak, you're getting dark, you know, like that's a harder conversation, right? Because when it's like, say you and someone in your family, it's a hard conversation because it's a hurtful message coming from someone that is supposed to love you unconditionally, right? And oftentimes, like in our families, when we pick on like the dark person, you know, like they think of it as, well, I'm just trying to give you, because I hear this from my own family, I'm just trying to give you good advice. You know, like I'm trying to, you know, like this is, you know, this tough love is out of love. And so, you know, like I don't have like the greatest tips, because like for me, I still hear and receive those messages at home, and like I do address it at appropriate times. So for example, I try not to address like a certain family member like when everyone is there. I try to address them like one-on-one, because I think that, you know, like that normalizing, you know, like telling someone like, oh, don't stay out in the sun, or, you know, like make sure you put on sunscreen or you're going to get too dark. Like it's so normal that they don't realize it's hurtful. And I think that on that one, you know, if you're talking to someone one-on-one, and that someone can be a cousin or like your mom or like an uncle, like I think that if you let them know, like it's hurtful, because sometimes like that person doesn't realize that what they're saying is actually hurtful.
That's interesting, because like this happened with Mike's Lola when she was living with his parents. Were like, we had just recently got married, and I was swimming at that time, and Lola said to me, hey, why are you so dark? Like straight up, like out of nowhere. And I was like, I hadn't actually heard that question from someone, because my family has known to not ask that of me, right? Because they just know that this is my coloring, this is my skin tone. There's no point, because they know that this is just me, but this is a new Lola to me, right? She's my in-law. And I forgot the mental gymnastics it took to respond to that type of question. And I laughed it off, as what a lot of Filipinos do, and was just like, oh, it's just because I'm going swimming now. I swim at work at my lunch. And her reply was, you should stop swimming.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is Mike's Lola. I'm not going to go off on her because she's a tiny old lady. But in my head, I really want to be like, have you looked in the mirror? You're not as light as you think you are. Because she was pretty brown too. She's not a light-skinned lady. So I was just like, you're not as high yellow as you think you are. So like, it's funny because like even the people with coloring make the comments. I always want to be like, have you looked in a mirror? Like the pigmentation that you have is almost the same as mine. Well,
that's why, because then, you know, they've kind of dealt with a lot of these forces and these discrimination for a while, right?
Possibly,
yeah.
Because you're talking about that foundation being too light. Like, it's interesting because as a woman, when I would go and find foundation, I had internalized the fact that I was so dark for so long that my foundation that I would pick on would be darker than my actual skin tone. Like I had internal, like not that I wanted, because I didn't want my face to be too light. I didn't want to do the mismatch of my face not matching my neck and my chest. So I was like, I'm gonna make sure it's dark. So I would always pick a foundation shade that was too dark for my skin tone, because my brain had taught me you're dark, you're dark, you're dark, you're dark. And if it wasn't for Sephora doing the skin match thing where they can tell you what your tone is, like I didn't understand, but like I'm a medium olive tone, and I was like, I'm medium olive, I'm not dark tan. And I find that that's the internalized type. It's very internal. It's all like it's all screwed up.
You overcompensate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing is like not that I'm saying that we let our, like our family and our loved ones go, but we also have to like recognize like sometimes like even if you're confrontational, some people just won't.
Yeah.
They just won't change, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to change the language. They're not going to change, like the approach. Because like I've been working on my mom like for years, and she still slips, And like I remember I had this like one moment of victory, and it wasn't even like super victorious. Like we were taking like Christmas, it's like family gathering. We're taking pictures, and my mom was like, "It sounds so screwed up." She goes, "Please don't stand next to me." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Don't stand next to me because," she goes, I'm so pale right now. Like I don't look good pale. And she goes, "You have such nice color, like you're gonna make me look worse." And I said, "Wait, Mom." I go, "Did you just say I had nice color?" I was like, "What?"
Victory.
And then she goes, "Yeah." She was like, "Yeah, you have nice color." I go, "Mom, this is the first time in my entire life I've ever said this. I'm so glad I have a picture of this now." But like after like we took pictures, I was like, I appreciate what you said, but I also didn't think, like I told her, I said, I don't think it was necessary for you, Mom, to like put your skin tone down. Like, you are always the color that you are, and you're always like the beautiful mom that you are. Like, it's okay, And she's like, no, I don't look nice. And I'm like, Mom, no, like just take the compliment.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I had like the one, like victorious moment, but there's still like the, oh, that person is still dark. Oh, like, when did that person get, it's this ongoing conversation. But, I do feel like you have to, in like that intimate space, right, among the people you love, you have to have these one-on-one conversations. But when you have them, you have to, as you're engaging, you have to understand that they may not be listening, or they may not care, or they may not respond, and they're probably not going to respond in the way that you want. But I think that the more important thing to do is to engage and have the conversation. Because if they're not listening, someone else in the proximity is going to listen. That conversation that you probably thought went sour might end up in them treating someone differently, or seeing someone differently. So like the results aren't immediate in these conversations about color, but I think that they're important, especially like as Filipinos, right, in the United States, as we move on in the generations, like, these conversations, I think, become really important. So have the conversations, preferably have them one-on-one, and know that, like, you're not going to win immediately, but the conversation in and of itself should be seen as a positive step, like a good victory.
Speaking of conversation, like, do you think the conversation is shifting in light of the fact that the cosmetic industry seems to be moving towards more color options in like foundations? Like when Rihanna's Fenty came out with like that ginormous palette, like I honest to God flipped out, because for the longest time I've never been able to find a color match. It just never worked out. And I always think like, oh, I'll do like cappuccino cream from CoverGirl. Like that was like my high school mentality. That was my tone. But even then I think that might have been too light for me. So it seems like the cosmetic industry is pushing towards more inclusivity in having more palettes. Is that going to possibly shift the conversation to more acceptance, or is that just like one tool? Is it a tool to like bridge that?
And also, do you see any kind of changes,
correlation?
Changes in the Philippines as well?
Okay. So, so changes in the Let me. So I haven't been to the Philippines in like 11 years. So I do think that in the Philippines, there is. I think they're trying to broaden their scope of beauty, and I use the word "trying" lightly because I think there's like a hope and a possible intent, but I don't think it's working at the rate of actual people. Like I don't think it's working at like a good enough rate. But the same thing happens in the United States, right? We have these moments of inclusivity. We have these moments of like, yes, we are, we're more accepting of everybody. But I think a lot of that has to do, it's not so much, and it's just my inner pessimist. I don't think it's necessarily because of shifting attitudes. I think it's because it's just good business.
True.
Especially like the United States, as we diversify, right? We're at this critical juncture where, whites are seeing the fact that statistically they are not going to be the majority of the country, and when we're looking at birth rates in the United States, I think 2011 was the first year that non-white births were greater than white births in the country, and that trend it's been that trend ever since. So it is good business to, for cosmetics companies to diversify, right? To have the products available. But to me, the question is, you can have the products available, but who's representing your products? When we look at popular media, like who's being represented, like that to me is like the true test. And also I love Fenty. I think it was awesome for them to release this incredible palette, but I also felt like it erased historically the cosmetics companies that have been producing more varied shades. So for example, Vanity Fair, it's this line that was actually developed during like the black fashion shows, high fashion shows, like they needed, cosmetics to use on black models. And they were the company that, that basically pioneered, darker shades and foundation, and they never get any love, there was a company called Prescriptives who had, that was actually when I got my first job in high school and college. They were my go-to line because not only did they have all of these shades, but they also had custom shades. So you can actually just sit with a salesperson. You paid a little bit more for your foundation and your powder, but you also got double the amount, so it was a worthwhile investment to get your foundation matched and mixed for your own. So Fenty is not the only one. I think that they're the ones who are getting a lot of the attention.
They have the best marketing right now.
Yeah, MAC Cosmetics also has always had a very wide range of shades. So Fenty is great, but they're not the only one. I think it's proper to give tribute to the lines that that were created before Fenty, who that paved the way for something like Fenty.
Yeah, but even with the availability of kind of more diverse shades, and also kind of diversification in the United States, there is colorism even within black communities, within Latinx communities, etc. So colorism can still survive even if it's a majority non-white country,
because it's not just a Filipino conversation. I've had black friends, and that they talk about it all the time. They mentioned that someone is looking a little high yellow, or acting a little high yellow. So it is a very broad conversation that we're probably going to continue to have.
Yes.
And we haven't
scratched the
surface. Thank you very much for doing this with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Is there a place where folks can reach you or follow you on Twitter or Instagram or whatever?
So I have an Instagram and a Twitter. I'm trying to be more active on Twitter. I'm still trying to figure out what Twitter's
What
for.
is this tweet?
But you're not alone. I still don't know mine either. How to do it.
So on both of them, you can find me at Professor JRO. I also have a website called skinmemoirs.com. And Skin Memoirs, like I've been trying to blog regularly. It's been a bit challenging, but it's also, I created that blog partly to track like any media. Like, so of course I'm going to link this and, like any media that I'm on, just because I needed a place to track that stuff. And yeah, but Instagram, and then also you can just do a general Google search and you can find me at San Jose State. But for anyone listening, if this is an area of research that you're interested in and like you really want to get into it, whether it be like through academia or if you're a journalist and you want to write stories, like please reach out, because it helps to have like these conversations. And I would love to work with anybody who wants to, who's dedicated to extending the conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the work that you do. I love this podcast. You guys are doing such awesome work.
Appreciate it.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.